So our next speaker is here to represent the year 2023, but he also spoke in 2019, 2021, and 2022. So he's had a long streak going. And he has a 10-week-old baby at home. Last night, he slept on a friend's couch in the city, and he said that's the best sleep he's had in months. Please welcome Mike.
Awesome. It's great to join you today for the 5th time at the New York R Conference. Very excited to talk to you today about the Big Data Bowl. And let's wait till we get the slides on the screen. Awesome. So today, my talk titled Open Source Football, a brief history of the NFL's Big Data Bowl competition. And really today is going to be a talk about something that you can join this upcoming fall. The idea is to put player tracking data from the NFL into the hands of data scientists like yourself. So before I get into it, I'd love to go over just a quick overview of the 5 talks I've given. This will be the 5th. So each year, the talks that I've given have really always focused on football, and they have grown over the years. So the first time I was here, it was 2019. It was at the Workbench offices here in New York, and I talked about the tipping point that was coming in the world of football analytics. I said, with the applications of football tracking data, there was going to be significantly new developments in the field of modeling statistics and using data to make informed decisions. Well, over the years, these models and the stats that we've had have gotten deeper and more, and even more actionable. I talked about a 4th down model that we implemented at the NFL's Next Gen Stats team, which gives live recommendations whether or not a coach should go for it or kick on 4th down. The year after, it was a talk about creating composite scores. So whether it was transforming single variables, multivariables, using James Stein estimator to implement some Bayesian smoothing, and different ways to come up with a composite score from a series of variables. Last year, I was able to come here and talk to you about all of the machine learning models that we have in production at Next Gen Stats, which is now over 20 in production. So from when I came here in 2019 to talk about completion probability, our first machine learning model, we now have over 20 spanning all different areas of football analytics. And today, I'm going to talk about the Big Data Bowl, which has really been the source of inspiration for a lot of the stats and the models that we've created at the NFL. So let's start with what is the Big Data Bowl. The Big Data Bowl is an open source competition the NFL hosts. It is generally or usually on Kaggle, and it's an open source competition where we give you player tracking data and a question. One year it was how many rushing yards will a running back gain when they get the ball on a handoff. Another year was data about the coverage of a defensive unit. I'll get more into details about what the topics were over the years, and we'll go even into more detail of the 2020 Big Data Bowl, a fun story from there. So what is the big data all about? Well, it's about leveraging the rich player tracking data set that we collect at the NFL, and it's taking X, Y, speed, acceleration, direction, orientation, and many other metrics at a per frame level every 1/10 of a second. And what we're enabling you to be able to do is to take that data and to create novel, quantifiable stats and metrics that can be derived and inform both NFL decision makers and the league office itself. The winning models and metrics, or the finalist submissions will appear or show up in Indianapolis for the annual Scouting Combine, where they present their work in front of NFL front office personnel, including some in this room today, as well as league office personnel. Now, what we do with that at Next Gen Stats is we take the inspiration of the model and metric that the finalists create, and we put it into production. So by the end of your submission, a year later, you might see your stat that you created during a live game broadcast as the play is going on. So let's walk through a brief history of the 6 years that have been the Big Data Bowl and all of the stats that we've productionized at Next Gen Stats. So the first Big Data Bowl opened in December 2018, during the 2018 NFL season. We call the 2018 season the 2019 Big Data Bowl, and so on. The first year was a few different topics. We gave receiver route data. We asked participants to come up with a perhaps rule change based off of the data. And we also asked about speed. What came out of that was a route classification model to be able to say out of all the 15 possible receiver routes that they ran, like a corner or a post route or a go route, which one did they run on a given play, given their tracking data? In 2020, this was a leaderboard competition where we asked participants to predict how many yards a rusher would gain once they received the handoff. We'll get more into this model in a second. There's a really good story about this one. In 2021, we gave participants pass coverage data and asked to analyze the movements of defenders and their positions on pass plays. From here, we were able to create a coverage classification model, which was basically what's the probability that a defense ran cover 0, cover 1, cover 2, man versus zone, open versus two high safeties. There's a lot of different metrics and models that you can get from these myriad of stats that we can create. 2022 was about the special teams game. So inspired by some of the winning submission in 2020, we were able to create expected return yards. So how many yards would a returner gain from the moment that they field a kickoff or a punt? In 2023, we asked to study the trenches. So how does a pass rush operate against an offensive line, and how can we create new metrics to quantify an area of the game that really hasn't been able to be quantified up until now with much more robust data. And this led to pressure probability and who's blocking who. So we can now quantify which offensive lineman allowed a sack versus saying at the team level that the team allowed a sack. And of course, this last, a few months ago, the 2024 Big Data Bowl concluded, and this was to give participants the data from snap to tackle, and we asked to create tackle metrics. So things that came out of it were tackle probability and missed tackles. So can you quantify a missed tackle opportunity and then be able to count those using just tracking data? The winning submission, led by Matthew Chang and team, ended up taking home a $25,000 cash prize. Today, I'm actually going to go a little bit deeper into the 2020 model when we created expected rushing yards inspired by the winning submission. So the story of the 2020 Big Data Bowl is pretty fun. It's where a team of data scientists blew the competition out of the water. So the competition objective was to ask the question, was to estimate how many yards would an NFL ball carrier gain once they receive a handoff on a run play. What happened was we asked for a distribution, a probability distribution, and these models were evaluated on the continuous rank probability score. And based off of this scoring, we then asked the submission, or every model was graded on out-of-sample data from later in the season. So you trained a model from earlier in the season, from 2019 data, and then used out-of-sample data to predict the leaderboard. And when it came down to the leaderboard, the results were not particularly close. If you look on the right, this is what, as Seth Walder said, this is what analytics trash talk looks like. It's not the best picture, but it's the only picture we could take from their presentation. You can see that the dot on the top right is their value in terms of the CRPS, the scoring mechanism of their model. The difference between the scoring accuracy between the first place and the second place submission was the same difference as the second to 24th place submission. These were two data scientists from Austria, Philip Singer and Dmitry Gordeev, and they took home the $50,000 cash prize. Believe it or not, they had no exposure, or very little exposure, to the game of American football. How did they do it? Well, to quote them, and I'll read it. If we focus on the rusher and remove other offensive players, it looks like a simple game where one player tries to run away and 11 players try to catch them. They simplified the problem to what they could understand. We assume that as soon as the rushing play starts, every defender, regardless of position, will focus on stopping the rusher as soon as possible, and every defender has a chance to do it. The chance of a defender to tackle the rusher, as well as an estimated location of the tackle, depends on their relative location, speed, and direction of movements. So you see on the right, this is a run play, of an example of the Seahawks and the Raiders. And you can see from the moment that the ball is handed off to the running back, the running back makes a bunch of crazy jukes and evades the defenders and ends up turning this into a touchdown. So we asked, can you predict how many rushing yards a rusher would gain at a certain moment in time? Well, let's take this screenshot and let's go into the minds of what Singer and Gordeev tried to do. So they identified that this is a screenshot in time, a moment in time using data. Now imagine this at a two-dimensional level, X, Y, speed, acceleration, et cetera. So we see that the ball carrier gets the ball here on the play. How many yards is this player expected to gain? So in the model, they ended up finding that the rusher was expected to gain 3 yards relative to the line of scrimmage. So they're expected to gain to the 24-yard line. Well, we know that these defenders are in their way, and they're going to do everything that they can to stop them. We also know that every offensive player is also is trying to impede the defender from getting in the way and blocking the defensive players. So what they did was they created a pooling data processing step to load into a two-dimensional convolutional neural network. And this was to feed in all of the relative data points from every player relative to the rusher and to all other players. What do I mean? Well, it's essentially creating a matrix of every player to every other player. What's their relative distance? What's their relative speeds? What's their relative orientation, acceleration, et cetera? And what you do is, without even having to train or create a bunch of features, they fed this model, they fed the CNN, these data points into the model, and were able to significantly outperform all of the other submissions who tried to engineer features to predict rushing yards. So rather than spending time on the feature engineering, it was the architecture that led to this novel approach. And we've used the 2D CNN architecture for other models as well. So this has inspired a suite of models and stats that we now use in production at NextGen. So how do you win the Big Data Bowl? All right, well, this is basically a tips and tricks, if you must, of how you, when it returns this fall, how you can win and make a difference. So the 4 things that we are grading, or that the NFL teams and league office personnel are grading it by. The first is football applications. How well does the project answer a question or solve a football question? So if it's about creating a completion probability model, what are all the features that go into it? If it's about creating a expected rushing yards model, does it represent the model that you tried to create? And so can we use the things that that you all create with your submissions? The second thing is data science techniques. This is where, is the methodology that you've proposed appropriate for the given model? Have you proven that the model is good enough in terms of accuracy to estimate what you're going after? Is it the appropriate use case, appropriate technique given the data? Number 3, data visualization. So with tracking data, there's a lot of ways to visualize the data, not just the movement of the players, but how well does a model and data perform. And so out of all of these, data visualization is a way for your submission to really stand out. And lastly, but definitely not least, the overall report. The overall report is the submission that you do after months of work to try to come up with a novel concept. But what we often see in these reports is a lot of, maybe not as targeted between the goal and the objective. It's sort of all of your code, all of your markdown in one. So what we would suggest is to refine that overall report, to get the story down, to present all of the information needed to get across your point. And to go even deeper, the best teams are the ones that have a diverse group of skills amongst their team members. So football expertise definitely matters. You want someone to be able to challenge some thoughts and ideas that that you wouldn't understand if you didn't have that background. But also data science experience and statistical modeling, data viz, even report writing. In no order, these are a few of the skills that exemplify one of the stronger teams in the Big Data Bowl. So if you're interested in competing, I would suggest try to find somebody who has a different set of strengths from you, because what happens is when we see this Venn diagram on the right, and Drew Conway, a speaker here this week, is the creator of this Venn diagram, it really does represent the Big Data Bowl here too. So hacking skills, math and statistical knowledge, and then subject expertise. When you put those three things together, you've got an awesome team. Another tip, review submissions from past finalists. Their ideas and their methodologies don't have to be novel. Your idea that your new stat, your new metric, doesn't require new methodologies. So if you go back and look at some of the modeling techniques, some of the ways that presentations and reports are delivered and shared, you can get a really good understanding of what makes a good submission. And this is one of my favorite ones. The features that you end up creating for a big, glorious model, whether it's tackle probability or pressure probability, the features that you've created are just as valuable, oftentimes even more valuable, because they're explainable. So what we've found is that a lot of times models are created, and the model's okay, the model architecture is fine, but the features that they created that represent something that could be tangibly communicated to a football coach, that in itself is of value. So this right here on the right is a SHAP plot of the features that go into completion probability. You can understand and be able to use those features to tell even more and deeper contextual stories. So the 2025 Big Data Bowl returns this fall. I encourage as many of you who want to or have any interest to participate. Teams can be a single submission, or you can have a team of up to 4. Really, we encourage data scientists who may not even have total experience with sports or football data to try out and to download the data from Kaggle. We're not sure if Kaggle is going to be the same place or location that this next competition is going to be, but if you keep an eye out for announcements from the NFL football operations team, especially Michael Lopez, the Senior Director of Football Analytics at the league office, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention Allie Blake and Tom Bliss, organizers of the event, who do such a good job year in and year out of inviting everybody, getting more submissions, and making this event such a success that it is. In total, over, I believe it's been, we've had thousands of submissions at the Big Data Bowl. Over 40 now work for NFL teams. So we hope that you can join us next year, and thank you. If you have any questions about the Big Data Bowl, I'll be here. Allie Blake is here in audience, so please feel free to ask us any questions. Thank you.